Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the new Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Obviously, this is a two-parter, which, if anybody doesn't know that going into it, you know it now. It's a two-parter. You will also know, if you have listened to me for any amount of time, that I am a huge Tom Cruise fan. So this will be a completely biased review. It just will. I'm being honest. I'm putting it out there, letting you guys know. Of course I loved it. You know I did. It's Tom Cruise. I love Tom Cruise. I think Mission Impossible is probably one of the few franchises that I haven't gotten burnt out on over time. And I think that there is a nice kind of ring to the fact that I started off this podcast a year ago doing a review on the second Top Gun with Tom Cruise, and then here we are a year later talking about Tom Cruise again in Mission Impossible, and I love that. I think that that is kind of awesome, the way that that worked out. So Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Let's just jump into it. Even though this is a biased review, and I will be completely honest in the fact that I super loved this movie, I will say the only criticism that I can give it is that it clocks in at about 2 hours and 40 or so minutes, I want to say. It seemed like it didn't quite run for that long, but combined with like the previews and stuff that always last a half an hour, I think you are counting on nearly 3 hours in the theater. And I will say that that is the only part that I wasn't a huge fan of. That there were some moments that I felt like it started to feel a little bit long, which, you know, if a movie is feeling like it's a little bit long, it means you're not as tied into that film as you would hope to be, right? You're thinking about the time instead of actually sitting there and really enjoying the movie. I think this one has a lot of really great action sequences. It has a really good story to it. I actually really liked the main sort of antagonist, the main villain, if you will, in this, which was a little bit different than what I expected. And for anyone who has already seen this, you'll understand what I mean. It is a very non-typical for Mission Impossible, I feel like, villain in this story. And I enjoy that. I think it's quite an interesting twist. I like a lot of the new characters that have come into this one. We are seeing some old characters come back. I think one of the reasons why Mission Impossible kind of just hasn't lost its luster, I guess, for me, for one, Tom Cruise, and I completely love him. And then for two, they, for the most part, have kept quite a few of like the original-ish characters. You know, we've definitely lost some characters who have, you know, died in some of the previous movies. We've lost some, but we still have Ving Rhames, we still have Simon Pegg, and we still have Tom Cruise. Those are the big, like, major players, and we are fortunate enough to have Rebecca Ferguson back this time as well, and I absolutely love her. She's just so gorgeous, and it's so fun to, like, see her not only in this, but also in Silo, which I just finished the first season of, and that was a twist ending. We're not talking about Silo in this review, but I'm just saying that is a twist ending that I did not see coming. So, and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning being the part one, we don't have a final ending yet. And this movie kind of felt like it almost could have, and I haven't seen the second part of this. We won't see that for a while. But this movie alone felt like it could have been two movies. There is a very, what I felt like, kind of definite ending to it, and then it sort of just continued to go for another hour or so. So even though it is only like 2 hours and 20 minutes, I feel like I'm not sure that it was cut in the best like way, though I feel like obviously Tom Cruise and the director and everybody involved is going to know where it is best to like cut the movie apart into two pieces. But it just kind of was one of those like false ending, I guess, movies where you're like, oh, maybe that's it, and then you realize you still have like an hour left. you're like, oh, that's not it. I did really enjoy this one. I think the only thing that is kind of a bummer is I think like one of the biggest, we'll say, because it's Mission Impossible, but like the biggest sort of stunt that Tom Cruise ended up doing is the one that we have seen 1,000 times across the internet, because they showed like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff for that, the jump that he makes on the motorcycle, like right off the cliff. And so that one was a little bit less awesome to witness in the theater just because I kind of had already seen it. So it's sort of like, you know, when you see the trailer and a lot of the best parts are in the trailer, and then you show up to the movie and you're like, oh, those were all the best parts. And there were no other good parts. With Mission Impossible, like that's never the case, because you know there's always going to be like more explosions and more fighting and all of that good stuff. But that one, I feel like was probably the biggest one, and it was a little bit of a bummer to see that like the biggest stunt was something that they had shared already. Beyond that, though, I think this is a heck of a good time. I don't think that there is anything in this movie that would stop you from like being able to take your kids with you, other than perhaps the duration of it. If your kids can't, you know, sit still or whatever for longer than a 2-hour movie, which I know is tough for some younger kids, then maybe this isn't the one for that. But it seems family friendly to me. We can really always count on Tom Cruise and any production teams that he works with to bring like really decent family friendly movies to the theater for us. And that is one thing that I have to say and give props to Tom Cruise for. I know that everyone is very well aware of the fact that Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. He is very open about that. He hasn't shied away from that at all. But I find it very interesting that with the dynamic of Hollywood right now, and especially kind of on the brink, I guess, of a potential actor strike right alongside the writer's strike that we are already currently on. I think the actors union, like the contracts are up July 20th, I want to say. And so we do have a potential strike with actors past that point. But it's just interesting with all of like the politics, all of the messaging that has gone into films, that the one person that I feel like kind of has been the most vocal about what his religion is and what his beliefs are, not one time have I ever walked into a Tom Cruise movie and walked out going, gosh, that agenda though, you know, like all of his movies are always just entertainment. He is 100% in it to win it as far as the movie game goes. He really is passionate about what he's doing. It shows in movies like the Top Gun sequel, and now this one with the new Mission Impossible. Like, you can see, and there were a couple of times in the new Mission Impossible where he is doing a particular stunt, and it's so obvious that he's like really doing that stunt, you know, like he does rock climb. I've seen quite a few videos of him doing that. When you see him doing some of those climbing stunts in this film, it doesn't look fake. Like, it doesn't look CGI'd, because you know, for the most part, like a lot of the background and stuff might be CGI, or they might be putting in, you know, bigger mountains or what have you, because he might be on a set somewhere. But he is legitimately doing that physical task. I think one thing that stands out for me is there's this train sequence towards the end of the film, and I won't give any spoilers, but there is some like obvious like climbing and stuff involved during this particular action sequence on this train. And I could tell, like I could very visibly tell he was actually doing that. And some of the movements that he was doing, it was very clear, you know, that he comes from that background of rock climbing and knowing where to put his hands and where, you know, to where his legs would go and where his feet should stand and all of that kind of good stuff. And it blows my mind to see him, you know, continually doing those types of things. And really, I can always count on Mission Impossible to just be like very action-packed, really good fight sequences, really good characters. There is a new character in this film who I think plays the character Paris, and I fully loved her. I think the actress's name is Palm. I'm not going to butcher her last name. It's just, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to disrespect her that way, but she's super gorgeous. She's definitely a badass in this movie, as all of the women are. And Mission Impossible, I think, kind of proves to us that we can have very badass, very strong female characters that don't necessarily have to be a Mary Sue, or they don't necessarily have to be like the Ethan Hunt character, because they all work together in this sort of symbiosis. I think the only downside maybe would be Grace for me, the character of Grace in this movie, because I don't quite understand why she does some of the things that she does, like why she makes certain decisions. Why are you running away from Tom Cruise? That is my biggest question. Like, why are you running away from Tom Cruise? I would literally be running in the direction of Tom Cruise. And I feel like most of the movies, you know, like, what was it, Night and Day with like Cameron Diaz, where she's basically just spending the entire time trying to get away from him. And I'm like, I volunteer as tribute. I will go with you. Because I adore Tom Cruise. I love his movies. I've loved his movies since I was a wee tiny little baby girl. So definitely this one is a thumbs up for me. I would highly recommend it. I would recommend watching it in theater. But for whatever reason, if you can't go and see it in theater, then definitely stream when it comes out for streaming. But I wouldn't wait, honestly. There is not a ton of really great things out in the theater right now. I think this is definitely one of them. I know we've got like Oppenheimer and Barbie coming out soon, but I would get on this Mission Impossible bullet train. It's really good. It was a great time. I very much enjoyed it. I think really just like the length of it maybe was a bit of a downside, but that for me was not a deal breaker. I'm still extremely happy that I went and saw it. I will definitely watch it again. I will add it to my collection of Mission Impossible movies. I've loved, I think, every single one of them. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. I would love to know what you thought if you have seen it. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.